Welcome to my channel, Hidden Points. Imagine for a moment stepping into the mind of someone who experiences a visceral aversion to others, someone who recoils from social interaction, distrusts motives, and feels a constant undercurrent of irritation or alienation. Most people see this and label it misanthropy, selfishness, or hostility. Yet the reality is far deeper, rooted in complex psychological patterns that are both unconscious and self-protective. The first truth is that hatred toward people rarely emerges from nothing. It's not simply a character flaw, it is often the shadow of unprocessed trauma, unmet needs, and internalized fear. The mind interprets perceived threats, real or imagined, and constructs layers of resentment and contempt that serve as armor against vulnerability. Let's go deeper. Early attachment experiences profoundly shape our nervous system and our ability to trust. When children experience neglect, abuse, overprotection, or inconsistent care, the psyche forms strategies to anticipate harm and avoid emotional exposure. In adulthood, these strategies can manifest as social withdrawal, hypercriticism, cynicism, and what we perceive as hatred. This isn't a conscious calculation, it's a survival mechanism rooted in the unconscious mind. Now consider projection. Every judgment or irritation directed at others is often a reflection of internal conflicts the individual refuses to acknowledge. The person who hates people may see in others the very traits that resonate with their own shadow impulses, their shame, insecurities, or unmet desires. Projection transforms these internal conflicts into external targets, creating a loop where the mind validates its own fears. This cycle is reinforced over time. Human beings are pattern-seeking, and the more one interprets the world through suspicion and hostility, the more hostile the world appears. There are physiological components to this as well. Misanthropic tendencies are deeply entwined with the stress response, hypervigilance, and dysregulated emotion. The amygdala and the autonomic nervous system respond automatically to perceived social threats. This means a person can experience tension, irritation, or anger before conscious thought even intervenes. This biological feedback reinforces the psychological patterns, creating a self-sustaining loop of social aversion. So how does one break this cycle? It begins with shadow integration. The hatred of people often conceals unacknowledged pain, fear, and shame. When these shadow elements remain unconscious, the individual perceives the external world as hostile, when in truth, the danger is internal. By consciously observing these patterns, one can interrupt the automatic reactions and redirect that energy toward reflection and integration rather than defensiveness and avoidance. Think about the relational implications. People who hate others often struggle to maintain intimacy or trust because every interaction activates an unconscious warning system. Relationships are interpreted as potential sources of threat, exploitation, or emotional harm. When avoidance or aggression becomes habitual, the individual experiences isolation, which paradoxically reinforces their resentment and sense of alienation. Cognitive distortions also play a huge role. The mind filters information selectively when operating under fear. This produces generalizations, hypercritical judgments, and the misinterpretation of social cues. The hatred becomes cognitively justified because the unconscious mind is always seeking to confirm its own beliefs and reinforce its defenses. And we can't forget social mirrors. The hatred of others also reflects internalized societal norms and cultural shadows absorbed during development. When these aren't integrated consciously, they can manifest as moral rigidity and contempt toward perceived weakness or incompetence in others, amplifying the aversion. Then there's emotional regulation. People who hate others often have difficulty containing or interpreting their own emotional states. When anger, irritation, or fear arises, they lack strategies for processing these feelings. Instead, the emotions are projected outward as critique or cynicism. The unconscious mind sees this as self-protection, while the conscious mind just experiences frustration and isolation. The absence of empathy is another key factor. A person becomes increasingly insulated from relational nuance and mutual understanding, without the conscious development of emotional literacy. The capacity to tolerate difference is limited, and the shadow becomes rigid and defensive, creating a cycle of mistrust that escalates over time. Every human being also constructs internal stories to explain their experience. For people who hate others, these narratives often emphasize betrayal, injustice, and harm. These stories are reinforced through selective attention and memory, becoming self-perpetuating frameworks that justify avoidance and antagonism. The unconscious mind treats these narratives as absolute truth, creating further alienation. Various psychological defense mechanisms are at play here. Projection, repression, rationalization, and more, all employed unconsciously to defend against internal vulnerability. The person may consciously feel certain in their judgments, while unconsciously operating from a place of fear or shame. This duality generates internal conflict and rigid patterns of behavior that appear externally as hatred. But what if these tendencies could be transformed? By consciously observing them, they can become a source of insight and self-awareness. By acknowledging the internal source of the tension, a person can develop strategies to regulate their emotions, observe their projections, and cultivate a more nuanced understanding of others, while still maintaining healthy boundaries. As awareness strengthens, the unconscious defenses soften. Behavioral consequences like social withdrawal, sarcasm, and passive aggression all reinforce the framework of mistrust. The person becomes increasingly segregated from supportive connections, which reinforces the original patterns. However, even limited positive experiences with trustworthy, empathetic people can slowly recalibrate these perceptions, diminish automatic aversion, and increase social understanding. A powerful tool for this is shadow dialogue. Internally reflecting on triggers, responses, and emotional states provides a medium for conscious growth. This inner dialogue is essential for reshaping perception and attachment. Unprocessed, this hatred of others perpetuates chronic stress, hypervigilance, and relational difficulty. This can lead to chronic isolation, anxiety, and a pervasive mistrust that erodes well-being. Conversely, conscious shadow integration, self-reflection, and relational insight can transform these patterns into resilience, empathy, and self-awareness. So, the final insight is this: the psychology of people who hate others is a mirror of their own unresolved shadow material. By observing and transforming these internal dynamics, an individual can shift from automatic aversion toward conscious choice and relational intelligence. This creates clarity, emotional stability, and psychological freedom. The deeper truth is that hatred of others is rarely about them. It's about unprocessed internal dynamics seeking validation externally. When this cycle is consciously interrupted, the shadow is integrated, fear is transformed, and insight emerges, replacing automatic aversion with awareness and choice. This is the profound, hidden psychological truth that can illuminate the mind, transform relational patterns, and restore a sense of connection. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this valuable, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one.